Emma Sinclair's journey to Hollywood began far from the palm-lined streets of Los Angeles, in the small town of Millbrook, Connecticut. Born to Lydia, a high school English teacher, and Thomas, a carpenter, Emma was the youngest of 3 children. From an early age, she displayed a flair for the dramatic, turning family dinners into impromptu performances and backyard gatherings into her personal stage. Her passion for acting blossomed in middle school when she landed the role of Scout in her school's production of To Kill a Mockingbird. The thunderous applause at the end of her performance ignited a fire within Emma that would burn brightly for years to come. Throughout high school, she threw herself into every theatrical production, from Shakespeare to modern dramas, honing her craft and dreaming of bigger stages. Emma's talent didn't go unnoticed. Her drama teacher, Mrs. Harriet Finch, saw something special in the young actress and became a mentor and confidant. It was Mrs. Finch who first planted the seed of Hollywood in Emma's mind, telling her, "Your light is too bright for this small town, Emma. You need to share it with the world." Despite her parents' concerns about the instability of an acting career, Emma was determined. She worked part-time jobs, saving every penny for her Hollywood fund. In her senior year, she even landed a small role in a regional commercial for a local car dealership. The experience, though brief, only fueled her ambition. Emma's decision to move to Hollywood came as no surprise to those who knew her well. On the night of her high school graduation, as her classmates celebrated at parties across town, Emma sat with her family on their worn living room couch, laying out her plans. Her father's brow furrowed with worry, while her mother's eyes shone with a mix of pride and fear. In the weeks that followed, Emma prepared for her journey. She pored over acting books, watched countless interviews with Hollywood stars, and practiced her acceptance speech for the Academy Awards in the bathroom mirror. Her older sister, Zoe, helped her create a sleek acting reel, while her brother, Nate, gave her a can of pepper spray just in case. As Emma boarded the plane to Los Angeles, her family watched with a mixture of hope and trepidation. None of them could have foreseen the tragic turn her Hollywood dream would take, or the darkness that awaited her in the City of Angels. Damian Blackwood was a name that once carried weight in Hollywood circles. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had been hailed as a visionary director, known for his gritty, realistic portrayals of urban life and his ability to coax raw, powerful performances from his actors. His breakout film, Concrete Dreams, had earned him critical acclaim and a devoted following among cinephiles. But the fickle nature of Hollywood success had not been kind to Damian. A string of commercial failures and a reputation for being difficult to work with had seen his star fade over the years. By 2022, he was relegated to directing low-budget independent films and the occasional television episode, a far cry from the A-list projects he once commanded. At 50, Damian cut a striking figure. His salt-and-pepper hair and piercing eyes gave him an air of distinguished authority, while the lines etched around his mouth hinted at years of stress and disappointment. He still dressed the part of a Hollywood player, favoring tailored suits and designer sunglasses, as if clinging to the image of the successful director he once was. Damian's personal life had suffered along with his career. His marriage to Vanessa, once the toast of Hollywood parties, had devolved into a cold, distant arrangement. They lived separate lives under the same roof, bound together by habit and the fear of public scandal more than any genuine affection. It was in this state of professional frustration and personal dissatisfaction that Damian first encountered Emma Sinclair. The chance meeting occurred at an industry mixer hosted by a minor production company. Damian had attended out of obligation, hoping to network and perhaps secure his next directing gig. He was nursing a glass of scotch at the bar, observing the room with a jaded eye, when Emma approached. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tinged with nervousness and excitement. "Are you Damian Blackwood? I loved your film Concrete Dreams. It's what made me want to become an actress." Damian turned, prepared to offer a polite but dismissive response, but found himself struck by Emma's youthful beauty and earnest enthusiasm. For a moment, he saw in her eyes the reflection of his own long-lost passion for filmmaking. Their conversation flowed easily, with Emma hanging on Damian's every word as he regaled her with stories from his glory days. As the evening wore on, Damian found himself increasingly drawn to Emma's energy and optimism. It was intoxicating, a reminder of everything he had once loved about the industry. As they parted ways that night, exchanging numbers with the promise of future meetings, neither Emma nor Damian could have predicted the fateful path their lives were about to take. In the weeks following their initial encounter, Damian and Emma's relationship quickly evolved into a mentorship. Their first official meeting took place at a quaint cafe tucked away in the hills of Los Feliz, far from the prying eyes of Hollywood's gossip mongers. Emma arrived early, nervously fidgeting with her script sides as she waited. When Damian walked in, his presence commanded attention, and Emma felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. Damian wasted no time in diving into the craft of acting. He spoke passionately about the importance of authenticity, urging Emma to dig deep into her own experiences to bring truth to her performances. "Let's start with a simple exercise," he said, leaning forward intently. "I want you to tell me about a moment when you felt truly heartbroken. But don't just tell me. Make me feel it." Emma hesitated for a moment before launching into a story about her first serious boyfriend in high school and their painful breakup. As she spoke, Damien interrupted her, guiding her to access the raw emotions beneath the surface. By the end of the exercise, Emma was in tears, and Damien nodded approvingly. "That's it," he said softly. "That's the vulnerability you need to bring to every role." Their sessions continued, with Damien generously offering his time and expertise. He helped Emma refine her monologues, gave her tips on navigating auditions, and even used his remaining industry connections to get her seen for small roles in indie productions. Under Damien's tutelage, Emma's confidence grew, and she began to see small successes, a callback here, a day player role there. For Damien, mentoring Emma rekindled a passion for filmmaking that he thought he had lost. Her eagerness to learn and her raw talent reminded him of why he had fallen in love with the art of cinema in the first place. He found himself looking forward to their meetings, spending hours preparing lessons and selecting scenes for them to work on together. However, as their relationship deepened, Damien began to experience conflicting emotions. He couldn't deny the growing attraction he felt towards Emma. Her youth, beauty, and adoration were a potent combination, one that stroked his ego and awakened desires he had long suppressed. He told himself that his feelings were purely paternal, a natural result of their mentor-mentee dynamic. But late at night, when Vanessa slept in their separate bedroom, Damien found his thoughts drifting to Emma more and more frequently. For her part, Emma's admiration for Damien began to blur the lines between respect and infatuation. She hung on his every word, treasuring the moments when he would praise her progress or share a personal anecdote from his career. She began to imagine what it would be like to star in one of his films, to be directed by him, to be more than just his student. As summer turned to fall, the nature of their relationship began to shift. Their meetings, once focused solely on acting exercises and career advice, now included long conversations about life, art, and their dreams. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, a mutual attraction that neither dared to acknowledge openly. It was during one such meeting, as they rehearsed an emotionally charged scene in Damien's home office, that the boundaries of their mentorship would be irrevocably crossed, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. The shift from mentor and mentee to lovers happened with an inevitability that would later haunt them both. It was a crisp October evening, and Emma had arrived at Damien's home office for their usual session. Vanessa was out of town, attending a charity event in New York, leaving the house feeling emptier and more intimate than usual. They had been working on a particularly intense scene from one of Damien's unproduced screenplays. The story centered around a forbidden love affair, and as they read through the lines, the air grew thick with tension. Emma, fully immersed in her character, delivered a passionate monologue about longing and desire. As she finished, she looked up to see Damien staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. The next moment, they were in each other's arms, years of pent-up desire and admiration exploding into a passionate embrace. Any thoughts of propriety or consequences were swept away in the flood of their mutual attraction. In the aftermath of that first encounter, both Emma and Damien were initially racked with guilt. Damien knew he had crossed an unforgivable line, betraying both his wife and his role as Emma's mentor. Emma, for her part, felt a mix of exhilaration and shame, worried that she had somehow manipulated or seduced Damien. But despite their misgivings, neither could bring themselves to end the affair. They began meeting in secret, stealing moments together whenever they could. Cheap motels on the outskirts of the city became their refuge, where they could pretend the outside world didn't exist. In these hidden spaces, Damien rediscovered a passion he thought he had lost, while Emma experienced a depth of emotion she had only ever acted out on stage. Their relationship, illicit though it was, seemed to fuel their creative energies. Damien began writing again, penning a screenplay that he claimed was inspired by Emma's vitality and talent. He spoke of directing again, of making a comeback with Emma as his muse and leading lady. For Emma, every moment with Damien felt like a masterclass in both acting and life. She absorbed his knowledge and experience, growing not just as an actress but as a person. As weeks turned into months, Emma's career began to show promise. She landed a recurring role on a popular TV series, a part that Damien had quietly advocated for behind the scenes. Critics praised her performances, noting her unusual depth and maturity for such a young actress. Emma knew that much of this growth was due to Damien's influence and their intense emotional connection. But as Emma's star began to rise, Damien found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. Pride in her success mingled with jealousy as she began to attract attention from other directors and producers. He became possessive, questioning her about her co-stars, and reacting with barely concealed anger when she mentioned meetings with other industry players. Emma, intoxicated by her first taste of success and deeply in love with Damien, didn't fully register the warning signs. She interpreted his jealousy as passion, his controlling behavior as protectiveness. When he suggested she turn down certain auditions or avoid particular industry events, she acquiesced, trusting in his experience and judgment. Their affair existed in a bubble, separate from the realities of their lives. But as Emma's name began to appear in entertainment magazines and her face started showing up on billboards, The pressure on their secret relationship intensified. Damien became increasingly paranoid about being discovered, while Emma grew more confident and began to chafe at the limitations of their hidden love. It was only a matter of time before the fantasy they had constructed began to crumble under the weight of reality. The turning point came on a rainy night in February, when a paparazzo captured a blurry image of them leaving a hotel together. Though the photo was too indistinct to identify them conclusively, it was enough to send Damien into a panic that would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. As winter gave way to spring, the strains on Damien and Emma's relationship began to show. The initial passion of their affair was giving way to the harsh realities of their situation. Damien, once so attentive and loving, became increasingly distant and prone to mood swings. The fear of discovery weighed heavily on him, affecting both his personal and professional life. Vanessa, Damien's wife, began to suspect that something was amiss. She noticed changes in Damien's behavior, late nights at the office, secretive phone calls, and a general air of distraction. Though their marriage had been cold for years, Vanessa was not naive. She started asking pointed questions, her lawyer's instincts kicking in as she probed for the truth. Emma, riding high on her budding success, found herself growing frustrated with the limitations of their secret relationship. She longed to go public, to stand proudly beside Damien at industry events and share their love with the world. But Damien recoiled at the mere suggestion, his fear of scandal overshadowing his feelings for Emma. Their clandestine meetings, once filled with passion and intellectual discourse, now often devolved into arguments. Emma would plead for more commitment, for Damien to leave Vanessa, while Damien would counsel patience and discretion. After one particularly heated exchange, Emma stormed out of their hotel room, leaving Damien alone with his thoughts and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. As the pressure mounted, Damien's work began to suffer. He struggled to focus on his latest directing project, a low-budget thriller that he had once hoped would mark his return to form. The producers noticed his distraction, and there were whispers about replacing him. This professional threat only added to Damien's stress, causing him to lash out at those around him, including Emma. Emma, for her part, was facing challenges of her own. Her rising profile meant increased scrutiny, and she found it increasingly difficult to keep her relationship with Damien under wraps. Several times she nearly let slip to castmates or interviewers about her boyfriend, catching herself at the last moment. The strain of living a double life was taking its toll on her mental health and her performances. One evening, after a particularly difficult day on set, Emma showed up unannounced at Damien's house. Blinded by her need for comfort and reassurance, she didn't consider the consequences of her actions. As luck would have it, Vanessa was home. The ensuing confrontation was awkward and tense, with Emma stumbling through a flimsy excuse about needing last-minute acting advice. Vanessa's suspicions, already aroused, now crystallized into near certainty. In the aftermath of this close call, Damien became even more withdrawn and paranoid. He began to see threats everywhere, in innocent questions from colleagues, in glances from strangers on the street, in the flash of cameras at industry events. His love for Emma, once a source of rejuvenation and inspiration, now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. As spring turned to summer, both Damien and Emma knew that something had to give. The catalyst came on a sweltering July evening. Damien had been avoiding Emma's calls for days, wrestling with the decision he knew he had to make. When he finally agreed to meet her at their usual hotel, the tension between them was palpable. Emma, sensing the shift in Damien's demeanor, launched into an impassioned plea for their future together. She spoke of her love for him, of the life they could build once everything was out in the open. But Damien remained cold, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond her. When Emma paused for breath, Damien spoke, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It's over, Emma. We can't do this anymore. The risk is too great. I have my reputation to think about, my career." Emma stared at him in disbelief, her world crumbling around her. "But what about us? What about our love?" she asked, her voice trembling. Damien's response was cruel in its dismissiveness. "There is no us, Emma. This was never going to last. You're young. You'll move on." As the reality of his words sank in, Emma's shock gave way to anger. She lashed out, accusing Damien of using her, of being a coward. In her pain and fury, she uttered the words that would seal both their fates. "If you leave me, I'll tell everyone about us. I'll ruin you." Damien's face hardened, a cold fury replacing his previous indifference. "You wouldn't dare," he growled, taking a menacing step towards her. But Emma stood her ground, her chin raised in defiance. "Watch me," she spat, turning on her heel and storming out of the room. As the door slammed behind her, Damien sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. He had hoped to end things cleanly, to walk away and salvage what was left of his life and career. Now, faced with Emma's threat, he saw everything he had worked for on the brink of destruction. In that moment, as the last rays of sunlight faded from the room, a dark thought began to take root in Damien's mind. If Emma couldn't be reasoned with, if she truly intended to expose their affair, then more drastic measures might be necessary. The thought, once formed, grew like a cancer, consuming all other considerations. As Damien left the hotel room, his decision was made. Emma Sinclair had become a liability that needed to be eliminated, no matter the cost. In the days following their confrontation, Damien's mind raced with dark possibilities. He oscillated between panic and a chilling calm as he contemplated his options. The threat of exposure loomed large, casting a shadow over every aspect of his life. He found himself jumping at every phone call, every knock at the door, expecting at any moment to hear that Emma had made good on her threat. Driven by desperation, Damien began to research ways to silence Emma permanently. He cleared his browser history obsessively, paranoid about leaving any digital trail. Late at night, while Vanessa slept, he scoured the darker corners of the internet for information on untraceable poisons. After much deliberation, Damien settled on a plan. He would use a plant-based toxin, one that would mimic the symptoms of a severe allergic reaction. It was a poison he had once come across while researching for a thriller script years ago. A cruel irony that now his fictional plot would become a real-world nightmare. Obtaining the poison proved to be easier than Damien had anticipated, a fact that both relieved and terrified him. He found a supplier on the dark web who promised discretion and quick delivery. When the small, innocuous package arrived, Damien felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the finality of what he was about to do. With trembling hands, Damien prepared for the final act of their tragic story. He composed a carefully worded email to Emma, apologizing for his behavior and suggesting they meet for dinner to talk things through. He chose a small, out-of-the-way restaurant where he was friendly with the owner, ensuring they would have privacy. As the day of the dinner approached, Damien found himself in a state of eerie calm. He moved through his daily routines mechanically, all the while acutely aware of the vial of poison hidden in his study. He rehearsed his plan over and over in his mind, considering every detail, every possible complication. On the evening of the dinner, Damien dressed with care, selecting a suit that Emma had once complimented him on. He tucked the vial of poison into his pocket, its weight a constant reminder of what he was about to do. As he prepared to leave, Vanessa called out from her studio, asking where he was going. "Business dinner," he replied, the lie coming easily to his lips. Damien arrived at the restaurant early, securing a quiet table in the corner. He ordered a bottle of Emma's favorite wine, his hands steady as he slipped the colorless, odorless poison into her glass. As he waited for Emma to arrive, Damien found himself reflecting on the journey that had led him to this moment. How had their passionate affair devolved into this nightmare of betrayal and murder? When Emma walked in, Damien's breath caught in his throat. She looked beautiful, her face alight with hope at the prospect of reconciliation. For a brief moment, Damien considered abandoning his plan, confessing everything, and facing the consequences. But as Emma sat down and reached for her wineglass, Damien's resolve hardened. It was too late to turn back now. With a forced smile, Damien raised his own glass in a toast, sealing Emma's fate with a gentle clink of crystal. The dinner progressed with an undercurrent of tension beneath the forced pleasantries. Emma, initially guarded, began to relax as Damien apologized for his behavior and spoke of his struggle with their relationship. She sipped her wine, unaware of the lethal substance coursing through her system. As the main course arrived, Emma started to feel unwell. She attributed it to nerves and the emotional weight of their conversation. But as minutes ticked by, her discomfort intensified. Her breathing became labored, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Damien watched with a mixture of horror and grim determination as Emma's condition deteriorated rapidly. She clutched at her throat, gasping for air, her eyes wide with panic and confusion. As she slumped forward, Damien called out for help, his actor's training allowing him to project convincing alarm and distress. The restaurant erupted into chaos. The owner called for an ambulance while a patron with medical training attempted to administer first aid. Damien stood back, playing the part of the shocked companion, all the while knowing that his efforts to help would be futile. By the time the paramedics arrived, Emma was unconscious. They worked feverishly to stabilize her, but the poison had done its work swiftly and efficiently. Emma Sinclair was pronounced dead en route to the hospital, her promising life cut tragically short at just 20 years old. In the immediate aftermath, Damien found himself in a daze. He answered questions from the police mechanically, sticking to his prepared story. They were colleagues having a business dinner. She suddenly fell ill. He had no idea what could have caused it. He expressed shock and sadness, his years of acting experience serving him well in this most crucial performance. As dawn broke, Damien returned home, exhausted and numb. Vanessa, awakened by his arrival, was shocked by the news. She held him as he feigned grief, unaware that she was comforting a murderer. Alone in his study later that morning, the full weight of what he had done crashed down upon Damien. He had taken a life, snuffed out the bright flame of Emma's potential in a moment of selfish panic. As he poured himself a large whiskey, hands shaking, Damien realized that while he might have silenced Emma, he would never be able to silence his own conscience. Little did he know, his carefully constructed alibi was already beginning to unravel. The death of Emma Sinclair sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Initial reports suggested a tragic case of anaphylaxis, but as details emerged, suspicions began to grow. Detective Lydia Reeves, a veteran of the LAPD's Homicide Division, was assigned to the case. Known for her sharp instincts and relentless pursuit of the truth, Reeves sensed that there was more to this story than a simple allergic reaction. The investigation started with a thorough examination of Emma's background. Friends and family painted a picture of a vibrant young woman on the cusp of a promising career. None could recall her having any severe allergies. This discrepancy was the first red flag for Detective Reeves. As the police delved deeper, they uncovered Emma's connection to Damian Blackwood. Initially, he was interviewed as a potential witness, his status as a former Hollywood director lending an air of credibility to his account of events. However, inconsistencies in his story began to emerge under Reeves's careful questioning. The breakthrough came when Emma's roommate, Zoe, came forward with crucial information. She revealed that Emma had confided in her about an affair with an older, married man in the industry. Though Emma had never named Damian explicitly, Zoe's description of the man's age and profession aligned perfectly. Armed with this new lead, Detective Reeves began to scrutinize Damian's life more closely. Financial records revealed suspicious transactions, large cash withdrawals, and an unusual payment to an offshore account. Digital forensics uncovered deleted searches on Damian's computer related to untraceable poisons, despite his attempts to clear his browser history. As the evidence mounted, Damian's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Vanessa, confronted with the possibility of her husband's infidelity and potential involvement in a murder, broke her silence. She provided investigators with information about Damian's erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to Emma's death, including late-night phone calls and unexplained absences. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the toxicology report came back. The poison in Emma's system was identified as a rare plant-based toxin, one that perfectly matched Damian's internet searches. With this damning evidence, Detective Reeves moved to make an arrest. Damian, realizing the net was closing in, attempted to flee. In a dramatic turn of events, he was apprehended at LAX, minutes away from boarding a flight to a non-extradition country. The sight of the once respected director being led away in handcuffs was captured by paparazzi, becoming the defining image of the scandal. As news of Damian's arrest broke, more details of his relationship with Emma came to light. Former colleagues came forward with accounts of Damian's inappropriate behavior with young actresses over the years. Emma, it seemed, was not his first victim, merely the one who had paid the ultimate price. The industry reeled from the revelations. Production companies rushed to distance themselves from Damian, pulling his projects and erasing his name from credits. The scandal sparked a wider conversation about power dynamics and abuse in Hollywood, leading to calls for greater protections for young actors. Throughout the investigation, Detective Reeves remained focused on bringing justice for Emma. She worked tirelessly, piecing together the evidence that would ensure Damian faced the full consequences of his actions. In her final report, Reeves wrote, "The death of Emma Sinclair is a tragedy, born of one man's desperate attempt to preserve his reputation at the cost of a young life full of promise." As the case moved towards trial, the story of Emma Sinclair and Damian Blackwood became a cautionary tale, a dark reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind the glittering facade of Hollywood dreams. Prosecutor Amanda Chen presented a damning case against Damian. She methodically laid out the evidence, from the digital trail of his poison research to the financial transactions that linked him to the purchase of the toxin. Witness after witness took the stand, painting a picture of a man driven to desperate measures by fear and ego. Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Emma's parents. Their raw grief and anger were palpable as they spoke of their daughter's dreams and the future that had been stolen from her. Emma's father, his voice breaking with emotion, addressed Damian directly. "You didn't just kill our daughter. You killed the movies she would have made, the lives she would have touched, the family she might have had." Damian's defense team attempted to portray him as a victim of circumstance, a man who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of panic. They highlighted his contributions to cinema and his previously unblemished record, but their arguments felt hollow in the face of the overwhelming evidence and the brutal nature of the crime. Judge Ramirez began by addressing Damian directly. "Mr. Blackwood, you stand before this court having been found guilty of a most heinous crime. The court cannot ignore the calculated nature of this crime, nor the devastating impact it has had on Emma Sinclair's family and the community at large. It is the decision of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole."
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back